County canvassers for Utah County this July 9th at Yeah, test.
Is it Aaron's computer?
What about you guys?
Hello?
It's my
Nope, it's just him.
Testing.
Oh, now we're good.
Test. Okay, good.
You just need to get out
think
of
it's
your
that
echo
one?
chamber, Brandon.
What's that?
You just need to get out of your echo chamber.
out of here. Hey,
Test.
that's not a bad offer, Aaron. Okay, we're good. Thank you. Yeah, now we're ready to rock and roll. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the March 13th Board of Canvas meeting. Any questions on those?
Nope, I read through those. I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Number 2 is review the June 25th, 2024 primary election summary report. This year.
That's good. Okay, I guess that's me. I'm going to share my screen so everyone can kind of see it. Okay. So this is basically a very 30,000-foot view of the election process and what we were able to tabulate. I don't know if you've watched the press at all during the elections, but leading up to the election, Utah County had a voter turnout that was really low. And I was kind of getting concerned as we were approaching the election day. But election day was actually quite spectacular. We had about 38,000 ballots returned in our drop boxes and about 3,100, little over 3,100 people that showed up in person to vote. Utah County started a new voting process called the FastCast voting system, where people could take the ballot that they received in the mail, fill it out at home as slowly as they wanted to, and take it to the polling location and cast that ballot at the polling locations without having to wait in line to get a new ballot printed and filling it out at a polling booth there. And that was quite successful. On line 8 right here, Of the 34 ballots counted in person, there were slightly over 1,000 people that used the FastCast voting system. So I thought that was quite successful. Now, I want to go to another screen. I'm going to stop share and share a different screen. Now, in implementing this new process, I want to just kind of be very transparent about this. We did have some issues with the FastCast voting system being implemented perfectly. There were some poll workers that maybe they didn't pay attention quite hard enough or something, but there were some problems, mainly in Lehigh. So if you look at this section right here, there were some voters that filled out their ballot at home and brought it to the polling location and didn't quite get checked in properly, then didn't get checked in and sign the poll pad before they deposited their ballot. And so if you look right here, there were 27 people that didn't quite get checked in, but deposited a ballot in one of the two polling tabulation machines that we had there. There was one that was designated for FastCast and one that was designated for regular. And 27 people deposited their ballot in the FastCast system. But there were 11 that checked in that didn't deposit it in the non-FastCast, but deposited it in the FastCast system. So there were some issues in the implementation. So our numbers are off a little bit because of that glitch in the system. But we know that now. We have addressed it, and we will be making significant changes in how we implement the FastCast voting system in the future. Mainly by making sure that the FastCast and the regular voting systems are on complete opposite sides of the room and people aren't crossing back and forth. It just kind of it was not implemented perfectly. So there were some discrepancies that we had to kind of track through the system as we put the numbers all together. So I just kind of wanted to let you know that was an issue. And it has been addressed.
So help me understand that a little more. So the people, these are people that showed up to vote in person and put it in the FastCast one, or people showed up with their FastCast ballot and put it in?
It was mainly people who showed up with their FastCast, and some of the poll workers didn't quite get them signed in properly. They might have shown their ID, but they didn't bring up the actual record and have them sign the poll pad.
Okay, so those people so they're not going to have credit in Vista for having voted.
Correct.
What about the count on votes?
The final count did count them. Our counts were off by about 19.
Okay.
Because of those ballots that were cast and counted, but they did not get credit in Vista, but we can't verify who those people were.
Right, but at least their vote was counted. They
yes.
just don't know it was counted.
Right, we can't, I had one gentleman call this morning, and I had to talk him through that because he was showing that he didn't get credit. And I talked him through his check-in process, and he did not remember signing the poll pad. He said he remembered showing his ID, but he did not remember ever signing the poll pad, which would have given him credit in Vista, but he did deposit his ballot.
So in theory, they're not a disenfranchised voter. They'll just think they're a disenfranchised voter, but their vote did count.
Yeah, their vote did get counted.
Were any of those votes close enough to have affected the outcome of an election?
No.
And then obviously
we didn't have enough. We didn't have any election that was close enough. I mean, it was, you're talking 19 votes.
Right. And then obviously you've taken procedures to make sure that doesn't happen in the future.
Very much so. Yes. Some of the other things that happened, I tried to really promote the use of voting in person and using the drop boxes instead of using the U.S. Postal Service. Not that the U.S. Postal Service has any issues per se, but the using of the drop box is a lot more secure, I believe, and people don't get as confused about if they use the drop box as if they use the U.S. Postal Service. As far as too late, here's a kind of a breakdown of all the ballots that were received too late. Starting on June 26, which would have been the day after elections, we'd only received 6 ballots that were postmarked too late. On the 27th, we received a total of 548 ballots too late. 347 of them were stamped and 199 of them were not stamped. And I just think that people still believe if they deposit their ballot on election day, it's going to be counted. It's not. By law, we can't count those. And they even continue to trickle in. On the 28th, we received 136, and then they start dying off. On July 1st, we still received another 64, and another 5, another 17, and then we even received 6 this morning.
Yeah.
But they were postmarked 7-5 and 7-6, so there was no way that they could have even ever been counted.
And that's fairly common. That happens every year, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I just feel like it needs to be emphasized a little bit more. Use the drop box. They're more secure. We know we're going to get it because the processing, the U.S. Postal Service takes everything that they receive from local post offices, bag it up, send it up to Salt Lake City, or down in southern Utah, they send it down to Las Vegas, which is actually closer than Salt Lake City. Process all the mail. But if there's any delay between the 2 points, those ballots could be, even if they're delivered to the post office on the 24th, they still could get delayed a little bit and get postmarked after midnight, and those ballots would not be counted.
I think we can probably work with in some cases, obviously some people just drop them off too late, and that happens every year. But there's a lady named Amber McReynolds, who was the former elections director for Denver, who was recently appointed to be on the governing board of the U.S. Postal Service, and she oversees the elections. And I think we could maybe call her up and see if we could work with them to do something similar to what the post office does on tax day, that on election day, they just know that they have to have a person at every location that hand stamps every ballot to avoid this. Maybe we could look at something like that to help avoid that.
Yeah. Well, in our voter instructions, which I don't think everybody reads, it says if you vote day of and you use the post office, go inside and get it hand stamped at the counter.
Right.
So that it makes sure it gets counted. And there are quite a few that did. The issue I did find is even on the 25th day of election, right here, it shows that there were 129 people that took their ballot inside the post office and had it counter-stamped in the post office on the 25th.
Yeah.
So I've talked to the postmaster here in Provo, and we're going to send an email to him next time, and they're going to distribute that a little sign saying, on election day, post this, say, find a drop box. It's too late.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Because these 129 people, if the postal workers had been trained as well as our poll workers, they would have said, I will accept this, but it won't count. Please go find a drop box.
Yeah. In 2020, we bought some flags that we could hook to the drop boxes that had a big sign that said, like, vote here, so that as everybody drove by, do we still have those signs?
I guess they're saying, yes, we do.
Okay. Just that would
That's
be one more
actually-
reminder for people
yeah.
to use the drop boxes. We bought those in 2020, and they just attach right to the drop box, so that, as people drive by the library, they don't see the drop box, but they'll see that big flag and kind of remind them to go turn in their ballot to the drop box. It just has, it's just a big banner that says, vote here.
Yeah.
So maybe for the fall, that would help people too.
Yeah, and then one other issue that we did have on day of election, let me see if I can find it real quick here, the 25th, right here.
Also, in 2020, the beyond like the at the counter, the postal service, we had worked with the local postmaster to put actual signs on mailboxes, like the blue mailboxes, that said, it's too late to return your ballot, go put it in a drop box. So they did that the night before in 2020. See if they could maybe do that again.
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Day of election. So these two numbers right here, probably can't see them. I'd explode it up, but it's a total of 38,637 ballots that we received in the drop boxes. We have some on the 26th, only because on the 25th, when we had our drop box closers, their bags could not hold all of the ballots that were put in the drop box. So we had to send out, once they got back, we sent out, actually two of our workers, Luke and Brian, went out again that night to collect the remaining ballots that were in the drop boxes, and those got recorded on the 26th as 2,300 ballots.
But they were closed up at 8.
But they were closed and locked. They just could not pick up all the ballots because the bags were not big enough in a few places. And so they got back at about 3:30 in the morning with those ballots, and so we processed them the next day.
Do you have contingency plans for November when we've got 2 to 3 times the number of voters?
Bigger bags, or multiple of them.
Just make it, or send multiple bags with folks,
Yeah.
and then they can just record 2 on their sheet. Okay, good. I was gonna say, I think we received 80,000 ballots on election day in the drop boxes in November of 2020. So that was
Yeah.
just election day drop boxes, because they were all emptied the night before, and it was 80,000 that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, so they will have multiple bags, and we serial zip tie those bags. So we'll send out multiple zip ties with them also.
Okay.
Okay, back to let me stop that share and go back. Okay, so we ended up with a total of, right here, 47,070 ballots counted for this election, which ended up being 41.2% of voter turnout, which was more than 2022, but not more than 2020. So I thought it was a fairly good turnout.
I had 2022 at 42.54% turnout, but it was very close on 2022
On
for the
20
primary. But yeah, 2020 was 53.26%. So it is a little interesting that in the comparable years, we're seeing maybe a little bit less voter turnout.
Yeah, apathy or whatever it may be.
And it also could be we did a ton of social media advertising because we had a grant to be able to do advertising that we did countywide for all demographics that just said, don't forget to return your ballot, don't forget to return your ballot, don't forget to, and then voter day, and then click here to find voting locations for election day. And we can't use grants anymore, so.
We had 84 that returned them through UOCAVA, and there were 226 provisional ballots that were counted out of a total 100 of 356. Of the ones that weren't counted, there were 7 that had already voted, 6 had insufficient ID, 6 were incompleted forms, and 112 other reasons that were not counted.
Aaron, they were not affiliated. It
Oh.
was a closed Republican Party.
So the 112 were unaffiliated voters?
Unaffiliated.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or
this-
affiliated with another party? Okay.
Yeah, so the state said we can't modify this form at all, so other kind of is the
No worries.
catch-all
Thanks for.
of all those other ones.
On the 7 that had already voted, in the past, it's been like an elderly person who mailed their ballot in and then a neighbor comes to pick them up for election day. So it wasn't like attempted fraud. They just didn't remember they had voted. Do you know those 7 or are any of those like attempted voter fraud?
Not that we can see right now, but we're still researching.
Okay.
But it looks pretty much like they voted early and then they forgot and
Yeah, typically most of those people were like over 85. And we
Yeah.
give them the benefit of the doubt.
And then we had 80 ballots that came in that were kind of in this limbo mode. If you cast your ballot and then move, you're not a fun person to track. Okay, so if you cast your ballot and then move, that ballot credit moves with you sometimes. And then sometimes they move and they call and they tell us, oh, I moved. And so we say, we're going to void that ballot and we'll send you a new one, but they send back the original one. And so we had 80 ballots in some category of that type of a situation that we had to track through the system. And we can't count them until the very end to make sure that they don't cast their other ballot. And so there were about 80 ballots that we tracked, and 34 of them we were able to count at the end, and the other ones we were not able to count. Actually, I think I got that number backwards. I think there were 34 we
That
weren't
would be
ultimately
better.
able to count
That would
for
be
one
better.
reason or another, and we were able to reconcile the other ones and count them. Of the challenge ballots, we had a total of 2,852 challenge ballots. We were able to cure, I guess it's the difference between those two numbers. I can't do the quick addition unless I go back to my other spreadsheet.
That's a significantly better percentage than last night.
Yeah, we had a
I was a little concerned last night.
Yeah, we had a third round that we went through all of them again. So we cured a total of 955.
That your number of ballots that were challenged is still quite high. Do we
The which one?
just the 2852 as far as a percentage of the total?
Those are the total cured that went through the process. The total left is 1627.
Right, but even that total cured that went through the process, I mean, what's the percentage on that? That's
It's, I used to have a percentage on that.
yeah, that's like 3%. That's probably 3 times higher than I think we're used to, like 300% higher. So 3 times higher than we're used to. We're usually a little bit higher than other counties just because our image quality wasn't very good until 2019. So we've only had 5 years that we could collect really good images of signatures. So we're usually a little low, but 3 times, I mean, a little worse, but 3 times higher.
You know, what we're seeing though is a lot of people are getting more and more used to signing their signature on these credit cards, and it's becoming more and more sloppy and just like these wavy lines. Whereas the past we have, you know, a better signature. And so people say, you know, their signature it's secure, it's because of signature verification, but if their signature is changing, it's getting a little bit more difficult to verify that. And so we're sending it through the cure process and saying, well, if you're going to sign it a little more sloppy, you've got to cure it.
Yeah.
So if we're in doubt, and we do try to kind of look at all the 5 different signatures that are out there. But if it doesn't match any of them, I feel pretty secure about my staff really looking at all 5 signatures. And if there's doubt, we try to use the cure.
When if we cure it, we're logging those signatures and associating them with the voter. So if we look at that percentage, so if 3% of the ballots and then half of them are cured, that's 1.5% of the ballots. I can just see us getting into a lawsuit very easily.
Well, if you also look at the ones that we
That's well outside the
verified
margin
that
error.
we know that somebody else signed that signature, there's quite a few that
Right.
someone else signed it.
Right, for sure. And we definitely need to investigate those, but it's just going to take a lot more manpower for you, is my point. Like in the fall, we're going to need a lot of manpower on SIGVER. particularly, obviously not round 1, but it's round 2 and round 3 of SIGVER is going to need a ton of manpower and priority because that puts us well outside the margin error. It's about 10 times the margin of error. So it's going to need a ton of resources in the fall for your manpower.
Yes. Any other questions on that section?
Maybe you can explain to us how you cure for those that maybe are here that may not know the different ways you can cure.
Right. So the cure process, when a signature isn't verifiable, we don't have, it doesn't match something in the database. If it's unsigned, or if it looks like it's a SIG swap, meaning there's a lot of voters that get a lot of ballots that are sent to their same address, and they'll pull the ballots out, and they'll accidentally grab one of the other ballots, stick their ballot in it, and sign it. So the husband will sign the wives will sign the husbands. And a lot of those we do. I export all the data from the signature or the ballots that have to be signature verified, and I import it into an Access database. I sort it by address, and anything that has the same address, I isolate, and I have my staff look at those two ballots to see if it was a signature swap. And so we try to cure those before we even notify the voter. After that, since we've already exported all the ballots that have to be cured, the data on the ballots have to be cured, we match it up with the voter roll and get their email address. And those that we have email addresses for, we send them an email address. And for those that don't, we have to send a letter out to them. With the email program that we're using, some of the emails have what is called a hard bounce. We'll get a hard bounce back, which means that email address is no longer active. We'll go and delete that email address from Vista and send those people a letter again. Well, not again, a second attempt. The first was through email, and then try to send them another follow-up email or another letter in order to try and get them to respond. We are looking at trying to implement a SMS program where we'll start texting voters, but that just didn't quite fall into place for this election.
Will you have it for the fall?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll reduce the amount of workload on the employees while still allowing people to properly cure their ballot. That'd be great.
Yeah. Number of ballots returned, postmarked, we talked about that earlier. And number of provisional ballots, we addressed that a little bit also. So that's kind of all that's on here. Do you have any questions on that? Because I do have another little bit more that I'd like to present.
Maybe just a statement with all of these exceptions. I don't think any of them would have changed the results. Is that correct?
Not if you look at the results in Utah County.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I know it's become quite an issue in Washington County and Iron County. And the cure process it's not an easy process. And signature verification with the advent of HB 448 made it a little bit more difficult and time consuming. And so, you know, a lot of people say, why can't we get it counted in a day? It's not an easy process. To do the signature verification is complete and as detailed as it should be. And it takes a while, and all the different variants that I talked a little bit about, you know, add to that complexity of processing ballots this way.
Yeah, and HB 491, when it gets implemented May of next year, we'll have to make sure that every person who touches SIGVER has an additional training as well, so that's more. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other things? Okay. I'd like to kind of move on. Let me stop this share. So 2 years ago in 2022, wait, I want to make sure. In 2022, Josh Daniels did an audit after the election and contracted with Cindy Butler to do a statistical analysis on the election. And I decided to go ahead and do that also. There were quite a few people who emailed the commissioners and said, you know, we'd like to have an external auditor come in and look at the elections. And I talked with Amelia Powers Gardner about that briefly. I mean, we didn't go into any detail. So, you know, I decided to bring Cindy Butler back in, and she did a complete analysis. And this was kind of done in the last couple days, working on some prep in the last 2 weeks. But with all the complexities of counting all the ballots, it took until just a couple of days ago before I could actually get her the full data in order to do this. And what you're looking at here is the tabulation results of John Curtis versus Trent Stagg's. Well, actually, these are John Curtis's and these are Trent Stagg's, but you'll kind of notice that they're kind of mirrored images because John Curtis won, so he had the majority of votes. But Trent Stagg started lower and kind of came up higher. And what I want to point out here, actually, let me go back to this other one first. It's the same thing, but it's not as colorized. Down here do we have a red pointer? Do we have one of those red laser pointers? No? Okay. Just seeing if you can see my cursor bobbing. It's kind of got a delayed reaction. But yeah, these colored dots on the far right, those are the in-person and the fast cast voting. The fast casts are on the bottom and the in-person are on the top. And all these other ones are through the mail and through the drop boxes. And so there's kind of some telling stories, and I'm not gonna make any conclusions. It's just kind of interesting to look at. The people that actually want to vote in person have very definitive voting selections as opposed to those voting through the drop box and mail. So these gray and these, well, just don't pay attention to the red ones right now. All these gray ones are just all the other votes that happened. And if I go back to this one that are colorized, the blue votes are the ones that came in the mail, and the gray and all the other colors are either through, they're all the other drop boxes or through the mail.
Is this time?
Yeah, that's time.
And how
Very
much
good.
time are we from the front to the, I can't read the bottom.
Right, there's too many things along the bottom. So it's basically, the first time we started tabulating these are by the date that the ballots were received. So we didn't start tabulating until the 10th, but we started receiving on the 6th. So we ran them through and cataloged them on the 6th, 7th, 8th. So it's from June 6th through Election Day.
21 days.
So yeah. So the mail kind of has things returned in the mail have some definite patterns compared to all the other ways that ballots are returned. They seem to be a little bit higher and voting more for John Curtis and less for Trent Stagg's. So in the governor election, again, the mail system tends to vote a little bit higher for the governor as opposed to the drop boxes, as compared to the drop boxes. So they're just, I'm not making any conclusions by it. there's no way that we had time to even study. There are some outliers. Like there's this outlier up here, there's an outlier here, but yet actually, let me go back down here. As well as for, voting for Spencer Cox, and there's also some outliers down here for Phil Lyman. So, there's some outliers in both sets. But we did not have time to, look at any depth as to what caused those outliers. There just wasn't time because this data and these charts were just put together in the last 2 days.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes when you look at some of those outliers, it's the date, right? Like Monday or Tuesday, you're going to see more because people voted over the weekend, right? But I think the key is that it's balanced. It's kind of balanced on both sides. There isn't a pattern forming. I think we all wish we knew why people voted who they voted for when.
Yeah, and then if you look like one that doesn't have as much ups and downs, is this was for Trina Cannon and Ricky Hatch. And so all of their ballots seem to be kind of in a statistical range. There weren't as many ballots to process.
Did they just have more open ballots? Meaning people didn't go farther down the ballot? Did they just leave those open?
No, I'm trying to, where's that number?
In theory,
That
they
number's
should
not
have the
on?
same number of ballots, just maybe not as many
I
people.
thought the number of ballots,
That doesn't have all of the data in it, that plot.
okay, so if I went back to this plot,
Well, it says total ballots.
but that's,
That's for that race.
no, there weren't that many for Tina Cannon and Ricky Hatch, though.
Would that just be
Yeah.
that those ballots, that those races were left open?
Oh, I'm sorry, you know what?
people
I'm
voted
wrong.
for
I'm wrong. 'Cause
Governor LG.
Tina Cannon and Ricky Hatch were a statewide race, so that is the actual
should have been.
number. So yeah, there were 84,609 ballots processed for them.
So we had like 6,000 people that just didn't mark that race.
Left it blank.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, and I don't think either of them received a giant endorsement, so that would also make sense why theirs is more steady, as opposed to, Trent getting an endorsement from Trump at the end.
Yeah.
Would have moved that number.
So I'm not a statistician. I took a statistics class.
Same. Same. I took a statistics class.
Yeah. And so I'm going to give a little bit of time over to Cindy Butler to kind of talk a little bit about, this chart as opposed to just looking at the dots. And hopefully we can gain a little bit more understanding as to what we're looking at. So if you want to, I'm going to turn the time over to her. Do you want to sit here and do that instead of going over there and struggling? You want to go over there? Okay.
So while he's bringing the slides up, I just want to thank the county clerk and the county commissioners for allowing me to come and do this again. And I also want to say that there have been a lot of improvements made from the first time we did it a year and a half ago, because there was a lot of effort put into tracking more internal process data to help improve their own processes. So I had more data available to me
You might
this
need to
time.
speak in this.
I had more
this is-
data available
this is
to me
online.
this time than I did a year and a half ago. So we were able to take advantage of that. So let me see. Is this my first plot right here? That looks like, that's not even
That's
my,
Ricky Hatch.
I think Aaron's
Oh,
got.
you're still sharing your
I've got to
screen.
unshare.
That's not mine.
Sorry.
It's not what I thought I was doing. So A year and a half ago, I had CVR data, and the only way I could plot it over time was with the CVR number, meaning the number that was assigned when it was entered into the election management database, which ended up being all mixed up. It didn't track very well over time. So this time, because of their efforts tracking the data internally with their, most of all from the sources, they really did a great job trying to get more data from the sources, like was it mail with or without postage, which drop box did it come from? So, and the received date, the scanning in date, those kind of dates were available to me, so I was able to use them. So is this one mine?
It should be yours.
That doesn't look like mine still. It says page 18. Okay, well, it must be. Let's see. Let me look at it. Is that?
Yeah, that's yours, but.
Yeah, there we
is it
go.
the
Okay,
page
I'm
you
with you.
thought?
Can you blow that up more?
No.
All right. Okay, so this one, I think you've already seen it. I was going to start with one that looked kind of normal, where there was nothing going on. So this is the state auditor race, and you can see each one of those gray points is a batch that was processed from the minute that it came in from the sources, and it was batched into the tray and then proceeded through the process. And there's usually about 250 ballots in a batch. So if there was 250 ballots, it would be the normal size, but sometimes your batches are smaller, so the dots are smaller. The only thing I did to this plot was I took all the batches and what percent went to each candidate, and I plotted the candidate on the left, so you can see Tina Cannon about averaged 60%. You can see that, 60% maybe, across the whole race. The only thing I calculated was the average for just the mail-in or drop box, and then a different average for the day of election out there where the colored points are, so you can see those two are a little different. And then I calculated the statistical control limits based on the binomial distribution, which is a very well understood and used distribution, and you can see it helps you judge with your eyeballs what a normal range of variation you would expect to see in just percentages of votes from batch to batch. And there's onesie, twosie, little things out, but with that many points, you don't really worry about it. So that's something that to get your eyeballs used to what this plot should be looking at and telling you. And then across the bottom, it says up there in the title that on this plot, I used the tray number order. So that is the actual, the order that the ballots came into a batch in a tray number and were processed through. And the labels on the bottom are the actual tabulator batch names. Even though I don't have the dates down there, you can figure out which batch it was from, and all the data, you do have all the dates and everything. So that's what this means. So let me just flip through them really fast. So this is the competitor, and you saw that one. Now, if you wanted to see easier maybe, how does competitor won, the first competitor won, and the second competitor lost. If you put that in the numerator and the other one in the denominator and divide them, if it was a 50-50 race, the ratio would be 1. And that's called an odds ratio. That's what they use at Vegas, play the odds. And that's what this plot is. That is the odds ratio. So you can kind of see if there's anything going on there. And then you can accumulate that over time, where you just take 1 point and add it to the next one. And that's what this plot is. It's a cumulative odds ratio. And that looks pretty darn normal for that flat of a race. And it just flattens out. So at the beginning, you don't have a lot of data, so it waves around, and then it settles down and it flattens out. That's what you should expect to see if there's nothing unusual or some other explanation or some cause or something that you can understand going on. So when you see this race, which is the U.S. Senate, John Curtis, it is trending downward. Can you see that? There's a little bit of white space underneath that average. And over on this side, there's white space above it. And then you can see the total shift from the mail-in drop box to the in-person. And that's a huge shift. That shift, the average for the mail-in was about 50%. The average for the day of was 20%. That is a huge shift. So now we can't figure out we cannot state why, but we all have a whole bunch of theories, a whole bunch of conjectures, hypotheses. And we can figure out how to test those someday, but not now. We don't know how to test that unless we can tease out some other data that were given to us, and we'll try. So here's the competitor, Trent Staggs. You said the same thing in the opposite direction. And then here's that, well, look at that one. Does that one flatten out? Not till way over here. So I would have expected it to have flattened out, and we already know, we saw the trend going on. Okay, so here's another race, the governor. Can you see anything? See a little trend? See a huge shift? It went from 52% to about 20% day of. Why? That is such a huge shift. You have to ask yourself why. And we all have theories on what that could be, and it would be so fun to talk about them all. The thing that I found that was interesting about using this data with Aaron and his helpers, this focuses your attention on the questions you should be asking. It's no longer theory for us to just, if we were out in the hall there and talking about our theories, but once you have the data, now everybody can focus on the right questions to ask. It's so powerful that way. It gets you all focused using data to know what to do in the future. So this is the competitor, Phil Lyman. Same thing. Look at his average was 80% on day of versus 49% earlier. And then here's this trend. And it flattens out, but I would have expected it to flatten out earlier, just knowing what I know about cumulative proportions.
It seems to flatten out
ratios.
faster than the Senate race, though.
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed that too.
Yes.
You are right. That one didn't flatten out hardly at all, but this one flattened out faster. Okay, and then I just picked another one, U.S. Senate, John Curtis. And you've already seen this one, so I won't take much time with that. Other than to say, if you look towards the left there's a blue dot. And that one's from, if you go up to the top, that's from the post office, that blue dot. And in the middle, there's a purple dot where that spike is. And the purple dot is from Orem Library Dropbox. So this can help you figure out if we wanted to go look at a video.
Do you know if this has the laser pointer on it?
No, I don't know.
I think so.
Oh.
It does.
Okay, but it doesn't show on the screen. No, it won't show on the screen.
Yeah.
I can see it.
You can see it?
I cannot.
Okay, I can't see it.
So
Which one?
that button right there,
This one?
yeah.
Okay. Can you see it?
It's,
I can't see it.
bring it down. You gotta keep it hold it down.
I'll just keep going. I love pointers, but it's not working for me. So right smack in the middle, and I neglected to tell you why there's spikes in those lines. And the reason why is because not every batch has 250. The mostly straight lines are batches at 250. Some of them are smaller. If you have smaller batches, you don't know as much, so the limits are wider. And the ones that go from 0 to 100%, the batch was really small, probably like 5. So you know nothing. So that's telling your eyes. You can't judge that point that's way up there, way down there if it's on the spike, because
You could have a rural drop box that all the people who voted in it were the same family, so they voted the same. So then you're going to have an outlier.
so you'll have 100%
Right.
from a batch of size 5.
Yeah, if it was like the Cedar Fort drop box and it was one family.
So the limits tell your eyes, don't pay attention to that. There's nothing to learn there. But if you look over to the one where there's a purple dot, it's not outside either. See how that spike goes through it?
Yeah, it's still within that margin.
Yeah. So I think that was, maybe we'll have to look. But you can see, suppose that you had videos at each of these drop boxes and you wanted to know, gosh, there's so much footage. Where should I look? This plot can help you zero in on the Dropbox footage to look at. So that's the power of these things. They can help aid you in the future, understand your process, understand any kind of anomaly, no matter what it is, on the good side, on the bad side, in a neutral side. It'll help you understand. So that's the other plot to that one. Here's the Republican. I think these were just colors. Now,
What would be really interesting is also to see it in these races that had more than just two people, right? I mean, you picked the top two, but there were.
I could do all of the candidates.
Yeah.
I'm just
One
showing you
like
the top
candidate,
two.
But it's just, it just has the top two.
Right. That's what I mean. Like with that race, with there's so many,
Which
and with
one?
him having Mike
Which
Kennedy,
race?
CD3, CD3.
I have them all. In fact, I have them all on my computer if you want to see them afterwards.
because
I only picked three
because
races.
he won with such a plurality that it would be, you know.
I have them all. I'd love to show anybody who wants to see. Let's see. And that was all I was going to say. Do you want to take, or do you want me to talk about these dots, or do you want to?
No, we talked a little bit about the red dots, sorry.
We didn't
The
talk
red
about
dots there are going to be the same as what the blue dots were on the one that I was showing. Because they're the post office. Because that was before you,
Let me just explain a little bit more.
Okay.
What I did is, each batch is not sourced from 100% of the places. For example, if you had all the mail ballots coming into a batch of 250, that would be a source of 100% from the post office. But sometimes those batches have like 40% from a drop box and 60% from post office. Sometimes they have different combinations, 10% from this drop box, 20% from that one, 30% from that one, 40% from that one. You see what I'm saying? And so I figured out all those possible combinations for this data, and I believe there was at least 153 combinations. And I only picked the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of those. And the way I picked them is I picked them for the top, the combination had to have at least 80% of the ballots from that source. You see what I mean? So that we could color it. Now on this plot, the red and the magenta,
one is 80%, one's 50%.
yeah, well, you had something else you were looking at there, so I'll leave that. But that's how we got these colors. I should back up. That's how we got all of those colors. It took a lot to do this, but it could not have been done. It could not have been done without the leadership and the people and the background of what we did a year and a half ago. Because we built on what Josh Daniels and Bill Lee did.
It was very helpful to know a year and a half ago what you needed. Right? 'Cause
Exactly.
we didn't know
Who
what
knew?
you didn't.
Yeah, nobody knew.
We didn't know what we didn't know until you'd
Yeah.
done it once.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is a huge step forward, and my brain's going like this, so next
Right.
time.
Then you know what you can do better.
We can do-
continuous improvement, right? Do you think that this satisfies those emails that we were getting and that we talked about?
I think it should. There is one other thing I wanted to point out. Can you give me back the screen?
Hey, Commissioner Garner, what emails are you referring to?
Oh, so we as commissioners received probably, 24 emails from folks that wanted an independent analysis.
Okay.
And so I had spoken to Aaron and Brian about those, forwarded them the email, and we had talked about having someone that isn't part of the county that's processing the ballots do some sort of an audit. And just, there were, like I said, there were about 24 citizens that reached out to both Commissioner Gordon and I asking if we would be open to a third-party audit. And like I said, we discussed that and said that we would absolutely be open to it. And so just making sure.
One other thing I did want to point out is there was a situation that happened on June 10th. The U.S. Postal Service showed up in our lobby with 3,392 ballots that were filled out in their envelope, and an additional 1,453 undeliverable ballots, so ballots that had not been filled out at all, just still in their carrier. And they showed up in the lobby to deliver the mail, and that is a breach of protocol.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we'd arranged with them in 2019 that we go there.
Yeah, we're supposed to go there and pick it up.
Yeah.
And it was a single postal carrier in his truck, showed up, and he brought him in. And Misty was out there, and he said, "Oh, I've got more I've got to pick up." And she goes, "No, you can't leave me now."
Yeah.
She goes, "I have to have two people here." And so we had to get somebody else. I think she got someone from the treasurer's office to come out to be with her.
Not the first time we've had to do that. Thanks, Kim.
Yeah. So it was kind of
and so
alarming
she's-
to me. I did go and talk to the business manager over at the Provo Processing Center. And we talked through about the securities that they have in place, because one of my other concerns is, great, he's got these ballots, but he probably stopped at other places before he got here and left his truck to make that delivery, where these ballots are left alone by themselves. And he assured me that when postal carriers leave their truck, they always have to lock it. And there's people who follow the carriers, and when they see them leave to go make a delivery in a building, they'll run up and check to see if that truck is unlocked or not. And if it's unlocked, they get a big reprimand. So, I mean, it's their policy to always lock their vehicles when they leave their vehicle. You know, that gave me some assurity, but it's still, custody was lost. So when we get it through our drop boxes, we know we have custody. There's always two people. There's always two people when they pick it up. There's always two people when we open it. There's two people when we flatten it. There's two people when we tabulate it. There's always two people that has custody over those ballots when they go from one station to another. And so that's kind of, when Cindy produced this information, I thought back to that June 10th, and that's when I said, well, what does it look like if, go back to share. You know, that's when I said, well, can we break these out by whether we received those batch of ballots through the post office or through drop boxes? And luckily, like she said, we are tracking the ballots in a lot more detail of where they come from and tracking them through the system that way. Otherwise, we would never have been able to do this kind of an analysis. And so on that day, that's when I wish this thing would work. And I can see it above here, but when I go on the screen, it doesn't work. It's just that first set of blue dots on right there on the left-hand side. That's the votes that came in on that day. And we're looking for any irregularities, and not, I wish I had time to go and kind of look at that outlier and kind of see, if there's anything there. I can't say one way or another because like I said, this took the last 2 days is when we were able to kind of finally get this together. I think that's all I kind of wanted to present.
Can you tell me real quick what happens to the ballots that are undeliverable?
They are, they're stored separately, but we take an image of it, and we actually have my front office staff, they go in and they make that voter inactive, and we send them an address confirm card so that they have a chance to say, no, that actually is mine. For some reason, it got returned undeliverable. So they have a chance to correct that address. And kind of another thing is when we mail out envelopes with the ballots, if you have a forwarding address on file, the Postal Service cannot forward a ballot to you. They have to return it to us. But on the address confirm card, they can forward that. So when we inactivate that voter and we send them an address confirm card, that confirm card's going to hopefully go to their next address, and they'll be able to see this and respond back to us and change their address if they want to. Otherwise, that voter will become inactive. And a lot of people have seen presenters saying, they track how many voter registrations there are just before an election and how many drop off just after an election. So naturally, just before an election, people, they don't think about voting up until the time of voting, and there's a large number of people who register. But on average, people move every 5 years. So 20% of the population is moving. And so we do get a large quantity of undeliverables. And
Plus the university, right? We've got 80,000 college students.
yeah.
So that's going to even be probably a little higher for us.
Yeah, so we got 49, almost 5,000 undeliverable ballots. So those 5,000 will be inactivated. So you'll see a drop off of voter registrations right after this election of 5,000 people.
Yeah, I just bring that up because as the treasurer, we mail out the tax bills. We actually had some tax bills that came back undeliverable, and we don't know why. They had perfectly good address, perfectly good name. They hadn't moved. So that's why I asked if you ran into any of that same sort of issue. We've been trying to figure out with the post office why that happens and have yet to really get a good answer. I don't know if it's their new software or what's happened, but we had
On
some
that note-
perfectly good bills that were just never delivered, and we just don't know why.
Did you get many of the postcard returns saying, this is actually still my address, I don't know why this didn't go through? Maybe you could compare those.
We just barely got the postcard returns yesterday, so we haven't really had the chance to pull all the numbers.
Okay. That would be interesting if your two departments work together to look at those and analyze and see if it's the same addresses.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we got about
even
200
brought the post office in
return
and
cards
talked to us,
yesterday.
and still not sure exactly why some of these things don't get delivered.
We do still get sometimes where there's really no logic. We call the voter and they're like, no, that's my address.
Yeah.
And the post office, for whatever reason, returns it up.
Yeah, it would be interesting to compare those
Yeah.
two.
I mean, it's not a huge percentage, but it's still kind of a mystery as to why some of these things don't go through.
And then the final thing I wanted to point out is, the statistics of by mail versus drop boxes, I don't know if it was tracked as closely as I did, but we did. I looked at one and it was about 60% before, whereas now we ended up with 77% people used the drop boxes. So I think that, through my efforts of trying to promote the use of drop boxes and in-person processes, I think that was pretty successful. And of the people that used the mail process, nearly 80% of them put a stamp on it. So I think it was a successful process to try and encourage. The way I encouraged it is we stopped paying return postage. And there's 19 of the 29 counties in Utah don't pay return postage, so we're in the majority. The statistic changed in the state. In this, there's a shared file that we have with all the county clerks. And it used to be 20 counties, but I saw just recently it went down to 19, and I don't know who changed. I'd have to go back and analyze that, but it used to be 20. Actually, it used to be 19, and then we made it 20, and then somebody else came off and made it 19 again. So I thought that was successful in trying to promote the use of drop boxes. We've talked about some of the issues with the U.S. Postal Service. Have no problem with them, but they are a mail processing entity. They're not a ballot processing entity. And so I'd like to encourage the use of drop boxes or in-person voting as much as possible.
That's good to hear. I was texting Suzanne, text me earlier today, and vote by mail is different than voting, getting my ballot by mail, filling it out and putting it in a drop box. That's what I've always done.
It should be
But I feel like
mail out balloting,
I've gotta
but
mail
return
ballot.
box returning.
Yeah,
the-
yeah. So
to the drop boxes.
I always
or
use the
same-day
Dropbox,
election
so
is
thank
even
you.
better because on
And we've
same day.
seen year-over-year increase on that, right? We installed those in 2019, and then it became,
Cameras,
yeah.
just very,
And I
very
think it
good.
became state law in 2021. We installed them in 2019. I think it became state law in 2021 or 2022. And as people get used to it, they'll do it more, right?
Well, the thing I like about in-person is that I don't have to do signature verification. I don't have to run it through the Agilis. I don't have to open it. I don't have to flatten it. I don't have to tabulate it. It's all done at the vote locations.
With that said, prior to 2017, when it became law, voter turnout percentage in the June primary of 2016, the year before we did vote by mail, was 16.83%. Today, it's 43%. If you look at the single biggest demographic, it's moms. And I truly believe that moms' voices matter. And moms in Utah County voted dead last.
No,
Statistics show that moms voted dead last in demographics until we did vote by mail, and now they're voting at an average rate. So you can try to degrade other mothers all you want. Moms did not vote at a high rate in Utah County until then. Right, and what I'm saying is she just degraded other moms saying, get your butt to the post office. Until we did vote by mail, we had 16.8% voter turnout. We now have over 40% voter turnout. And the statistics show that the single largest demographic who increased voter turnout was moms, and then it was the elderly. And both of those groups, their voices matter too.
Okay.
Moms can go to the post office, they're very capable people. We can also.
Very good.
right.
Anything
Yeah,
else,
so
Aaron?
I-
Thank you.
And I just want to say, life has gotten a little bit more complex. And so the vote by mail process, it's done a lot of good for a lot of people. But I think the average person should still consider, I'm an average person. I can go vote in person, or I can use the drop box. And that should be the emphasis, is vote by person, drop box, by mail. The U.S. Postal Service, as good as they are, they are a mail processing
Right,
entity. They are not a ballot processing, and there's some security issues there,
yeah.
as was evidenced in the things
No,
just.
and I totally agree. You're absolutely right, which is why I installed the drop boxes in 2019, because you're absolutely right that with the drop boxes, we wanted to install them because that is a more secure chain of custody. We just recognize that there is a demographic of people that
Where's that survey?
Yeah,
it's in the vote data. Look it up in Vista. It's in all the vote data.
And it's-
but there is a demographic of people that are mobility constrained, and that's a good option for them.
and just on the vote boxes themselves. Yeah, on the vote boxes themselves, we did replace every lock on every drop box, on drop boxes, because we found that the keys that they sent with the drop boxes, anybody could take and get it copied. And so we ordered new locks where the keys are not duplicatable. There are 3 keys for each drop box. And that's because we have to send 2 keys out. There's 2 people that go to each drop box, and they have a signed affidavit that we give them a box of keys, and that person is responsible for that set of keys, and the other one is responsible, they're not, to trade them. And then we keep 1 key in the office. And nobody can make duplicates of those keys. So it's a lot more secure. There were some keys made for the other drop boxes before we replaced the keys, and I was like, how did those duplicates get made? I never authorized that. So that kind of created an alarm for the drop boxes. So we replaced every lock in every drop box.
Good.
Aaron,
Thank you, Aaron.
you didn't have any evidence of any tampering with the drop boxes during this election, have you?
No, and we gave specific instruction to the ballot drop box people that went and picked up that they are to remain in front of the drop box, and they're supposed to seal the bag with zip ties in front of the camera.
Perfect.
In watching the film, we're gonna have to do a little bit more training on that. There were some that didn't quite, they turned their back once or twice, and we're going to make it very specific. This is a secure process. You cannot turn your back once you open those doors. That camera has to be able to see everything that you do.
Yeah. Are you still using serialized tamper-proof seals as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And we know what serial number it is that we sent out with them, and we make sure that that's the same serial number that comes back with it.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to your staff. Well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you. Any other questions on item 2?
I don't. I can make a motion to approve item number 2.
We have a motion?
Did you want to have any public comment?
We'll do that at
We'll
the
do
end.
that at the
Oh,
end.
you do that at the end?
Yeah.
Did you want to mention anything about the audit that you performed on?
Oh, that's a good question. So we do perform a ballot audit. It's a state mandated 1% ballot audit. So all those batches, all those little dots, they have a batch number assigned to it and what tabulation machine tabulated it. So we have to send that information to the Lieutenant Governor's office. And the Lieutenant Governor's office sends us back a list of boxes or batches that we have to audit. We have to audit at least one batch from each major tabulator. And I sent out a request. I can only have one. So the audit teams work in groups of 2s on a machine. And we have 3 machines that you can do the audit on. So I can only have my staff be 3 of those employees or 3 of those peoples that are conducting the audit. The other 3 have to be members of the public or somebody else that I don't employ. This year we had 6 people showed up for the audit. 5 showed up on time. 1 was a little late. We issued the oath of offices before the 6th one showed up, so he couldn't help us, but he was kind of an observer. So I actually had 5 people working the computer and handling the ballots instead of 3 public and 3 of my staff. So it was the public mainly that conducted the audit. We pulled out the batch of the actual ballots, and so they hold the ballot there in their hands. They look at the picture that the machine takes, and then on the machine it has this green dot that shows which candidate the machine gave credit to. So they're looking at the ballot and they're looking at the image of the ballot and where that green dot is, and then there's another thing that you can select and actually see what the cast vote record is for that ballot and what actually got credit. So we went through, it was about 1,000 ballots. It was 6 boxes, but some of them didn't have quite 250 ballots in it. We did those 6 batches that the state told us to do, and then I had 4 of those members of the public select 4 more batches of 250. So they had free access to all of the batch boxes, and they went up and picked the batch that they wanted to audit. And so we did 4 more boxes of 250, so an additional 1,000 ballots. So we ended up conducting about a 2% audit instead of a 1% audit. And it was pretty much conducted by the public.
Any exceptions or anomalies during
The
the audit?
only anomaly that we found was there was one ballot that went through the tabulator and didn't get marked as adjudicated, that it was kind of questionable. It should have been adjudicated. Adjudicated means that there's some stray marks and somebody has to physically look at it and try to decipher what the voter was trying to vote. He was using a felt tip marker rather than a pen. And in one race, we couldn't tell if he just had the felt tip marker resting next to the oval or if that was actually a mark. And so we debated it back and forth because it didn't go adjudicated. So the computer didn't catch it because it was outside of the circle, but it was big enough to say maybe he wanted to vote for that. But there were other marks on other races where there was a mark next to the oval, but a mark inside an oval. So we couldn't tell if that mark on the one race was a resting, what we call a resting pen mark, or an actual vote. And half of us said to count it, the other half said no. And if in doubt, and if it's not clear what the voter intent is, you have to say no. So that was probably the only one that we had an issue with out of the 2,000 that we reviewed.
Yeah, that's noted. I saw that noted on your audit report. That's,
Is that?
Good question.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item number 3 is approve and authorize the commission chair to sign the June 25th, 2024 primary election certified report.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. Now comes our time for public comment. We would ask that if you want to address the Board of Canvassers, please do so. We'd ask that you keep your comments to under 2 minutes and refrain from applause to keep decorum in case someone hears with a differing opinion from you and might not feel comfortable. We always ask that. And so that's just fair, so that if there is somebody else, please be respectful. So, and yes, anybody? Come on up. Please state your name and for the record.
My name is Brett Rollins. I'm a resident of Lehigh. I'm the person who called Aaron Davidson, the county clerk, about my ballot, which was showing as not counted in the system as of today. I understand the explanation. I understand that mistakes happen. They're telling me that the check-in process didn't happen properly and that the vote was counted but not associated with my name. With respect, that gives me no comfort. How do I know that my ballot was counted? The answer is I don't. We don't, for sure. And things like this, the anomalies that we talked about today and all the problems with mail-in voting, the result of that is that people have no confidence in our election systems. And that is a dangerous place to be in. It's a very dangerous place to be in. We have to do away with mail-in voting. I understand that there is a place for that. I have lived overseas during an election, and I appreciated the opportunity to still participate in the election. People get deployed in the military. People are homebound. There are certain reasons where that applies, but it should not be the default for everyone. There are so many problems with mail-in voting, and we have known this for decades. There was a study done by MIT and a university in California that I can't remember in 2001, after the 2000 election, and they identified clear back then issues and concerns with mail-in voting. They saw a rise in that happening, and they said there are problems with mail-in voting, and we need to be careful with that. This is known, it's not news to people. I mean, mail-in voting is essentially not a secret ballot. There's no guarantee that it gets to the person that it's intended for. There's no guarantee that the person that was intended for fills it out. There's no guarantee that they fill it out without coercion from some other person. There's no identification except signatures, which can easily be forged. It's a disaster. I mean, even in this meeting, we've heard that there were 754, if I heard correctly, votes in Utah County that were not counted because of postmark errors. And then I believe you just said there were 5,000 undelivered. We're talking about a race, a total of about 100,000 ballots here. So if we just round that off, that's 6,000 out of 100,000. That's 6% of the people who wanted to vote in this election, and their votes didn't get counted because of mail problems. That's a disaster. We should not be patting ourselves on the back. We need to return to sanity. It should be one day, one vote, one person, in person, on paper. Thank you.
Please. Please refrain from if someone's here, like I say, that has an opposing view from the group, then I would just please ask that you please refrain from applause. Please.
Let's create a safe space.
Okay, thank you.
Karen Zaya, I'm from Lakeshore. Did you need something else? I can't remember what you asked for.
That's it.
Just my name. Okay. I wholeheartedly agree with the last gentleman. I will say that okay, maybe not Mike Kennedy's race. Almost every race that I was concerned about was within 5%. So to hear that 6% of the ballots in Utah County didn't get to where they were supposed to be is horrifying. I worked on a campaign, spent a lot of hours. It came down to probably 2%. And it was a county race. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. As far as mail-in ballots go, my comment is that we've always had absentee ballots. There is no reason that a mother who knows that she cannot make it to election day can't request a ballot. The rest of us should be going to the polls. And I don't know how many people are aware, so I'm going to say it for those who are here. But I was able to take my name off of having my ballot sent to me. I don't get a ballot in the mail. I have 3 other family members that get their ballot in the mail. I go and vote in person. I don't have a choice because I just said, please don't send one to me. It's that important to me that I go to the polls. We need to educate the public about their options because I know there are options out there. Most of the public doesn't know that they can go to the polls anymore. I talked to so many people who did not know that they could go to the polls. So I would just beg, I know it's not up to the county, but I think there are influences that the county can have on our state legislators who are making those laws. And just one more comment, if I can. Thank you so much, Aaron Davidson, for all your work, for everything you do for the county, for us to have assurances that what we do have is secure. Because that's my other concern, is the cost of the election. We've been told that we've gone to mail-in ballots because it's less expensive. But is it worth the expense of not being sure that the election is secure? All this expense of days and days before we know what the actual result is because of the extra laws that have had to be put in place for signature verification and all this stuff. Is it really less expensive to our communities? I would say no. Thank you.
Karen.
My name is Barbara Metaxas, and I'm from Orem. One thing that concerns me most about mail-in ballots is we don't know who they're going to, or if they're even going to a valid address. Have we done a fractal analysis of our voter rolls to make sure that those voter rolls are good and solid? There are people living in those actual locations. That's really important to know, especially when we have so many immigrants. They could just go anywhere and go to a field and they pick them up and vote. But I think using the fractal analysis for the voter rolls in the beginning would be a really good start. You've got a great system for trying to make sure the vote is secure. Let's make sure that the votes go to the right people.
Is it proper to respond
Barbara.
to things like that?
We after the meeting you can.
Yeah.
So during public comment we don't
Okay.
engage.
Just-
But
just
if
wondering.
if you want to get with Barbara after the meeting, you can.
My name is Steve Watrous from Springville. Actually, I have a question before I make a little comment, but my question is probably either to you, Aaron, or to Cindy. To clarify for me, you mentioned in the governor's race, the graph showed 52% to 20%, and I don't understand what that implied. Is there an explanation or just a clarification as to what that showed?
We'll have them get with you after and clear that up. Explain.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of part of the government protocol, and it's in a meeting. And I can talk to you afterwards and show you.
That'd be
It's just
fine. That'd be
in
fine.
public comment, it's a 2-minute, so everyone can comment.
All right. Well, I
Yeah.
guess my comment then is, we were in New York State during 2015 and part of 2016. And we voted by absentee ballot. Sometime after we returned to Springville, it turned into mail-in ballots, and I was confused. How did this happen? I hear the lamest excuses for why we should have mail-in ballots or drop box or whatever, as opposed to showing up in person like we did at a school or a library or wherever in our local legislative area. And so you can just, if I can just go on the record as one who is opposed to mail-in ballot, I appreciate all that Aaron has done in terms of drop boxes. I think that has been the best of some pretty lame opportunities for voting in person.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Eves. I'm from Linden. I'm a state and Utah County delegate. I am asking you today to not verify these and certify these elections. I spent 18 hours at Republican convention this year, and I'm concerned about the fair treatment of Phil Lyman. He is the only Republican-endorsed gubernatorial candidate. He won a convention by almost 70%. Cox was only on the ballot because he paid to get signatures. The election should not be certified until Cox and Henderson's signatures had been checked and verified to see if they obtained all 28,000 signatures fairly to even appear on the ballot. The people of Utah want fair and honest elections. We want transparency. Phil Lyman and Natalie Clausen have been denied over and over seeing these records. They should be public information. It is a very normal request. Deidre Henderson is refusing to release all the signatures, and this is a conflict of interest. She works in the governor's office. But until all the governor's signatures are made available to check and make sure that they are even qualified to be on the ballot, these elections should not be verified. How could you, in good conscience, verify elections when the legitimacy of a candidate is in question? I want to say that a friend of mine is a precinct chair and the voter rolls are not up to date. Several of her registered voters on her list are deceased. So thank you. Please do not certify these elections.
Tiffany Barker, I'm a precinct chair in Lehigh. A few quick thoughts. So I've been a mom. Amelia, I'm glad you talked about being a mom, right? I've been a mom for 14 years. I grew up in a family with 6 children. My mom went to the polls every time to vote. I go to the polls every time to show my kids. If we want to be moms voting, you talk about a mom's voice, right? Our role as a mom is to raise our children and teach them patriotism and what voting is. If you're sitting on the counter, fill this out, drop it in the mailbox, that teaches your kids nothing. If they go with you to a ballot, to go and to a polling location, to go and vote in person, that's the memory I have. I wouldn't notice my mom filling something out on the counter. So yeah, moms can vote, but I still don't understand why our number one goal is voter turnout. I don't get it. I feel like we should be educated voters. We should invest in this. If you care enough to have your ballot counted, they should be educated to know if you put it in the mailbox, the likelihood, the chain of custody, Aaron brought up some problems with, they leave the truck and they go and bring in the bag of ballots and they're not supposed to do that. There are so many flaws in this. So if moms want to be, we want moms' voices, like you said, and I completely agree with that because I am a mom. But I think that we have the right to know if you mail in your ballot, there are so many problems that could happen with that. It's not a secure process. We should be voting in person. We should be educated. Our number one goal should not be everybody has to vote. It's everybody figure out what's going on, study the candidates, and that's why it matters to have the caucus system, because we are informed voters. We are studying records. We know what people are doing behind the scenes. And the more that you repost and retweet stuff of people hiding things, specifically Amelia, it does not help our voter confidence at all in our elected officials. Stop retweeting things on X that say they're hiding things and they're not showing things. We have the ability and the right to have access to the public records. Thank you.
My name is Michelle Steele. I live in Orem. I had similar thoughts as a mom of young children. Please do not disparage mothers by treating us as we're incapable of going to a voting location. We go everywhere. We all, you know this, run errands, go to grocery stores, take our kids to school, go to libraries. We can go to a voting location. We can bring our children there. It's not difficult, and we're not incapable. We're very smart, capable people. So I found that extremely offensive to insinuate that mothers are incapable of doing something so simple, especially something that people have lost their lives for the right for us to vote. This is a sacred right we each have, and we should regard it as such. It shouldn't be something that is easily tampered with or that we can't easily verify. We don't want mail-in ballots. We don't want that. The citizens don't want that. We want to vote in person on election day with our IDs. We want to be able to have confidence in our elections. We want to know for a surety that our vote is counted, because it matters to us so much as citizens. It matters to us so much as mothers and as people that live in this community. That's so important. It's the utmost importance. We don't need convenience and ease if we can't guarantee safety and security in our elections. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Bybee, and I'm from Orem. This is the first time that I have voted in Utah. I'm from Idaho, and I had to register. I registered in person day of, and there was a few concerns that I had. I had to bring proof of residency because I have an Idaho license, which totally fine. I had my proof of residency. I had all type. When I was there, they didn't look at it. They just assumed that it was because I had many papers that it was my proof of residency. And it's a very different experience voting in Utah from voting in Idaho. In Idaho, they say your name, they check everything, and then when you leave, they say, Kirsten Bybee has voted. When I just hand something in and they put it in the envelope, so it was like, well, what was the point of voting in person? I could have just mailed it in. Another concern I have is that absentee ballots, if you want to vote, you can do it, and by saying that, you're taking the ownership of it. And the last is our founders, when writing the Constitution, their ideals were for people who owned property to vote versus a mass of people. And by having that, we're having a mass problem with our voting system. And that's all I wanted to say.
Hi, my name is Jay Clark from Lehigh, Utah. I love Utah. We moved here a few years ago, and just so happy to be here. In 1976, Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan had a luncheon at our home, and then in the primaries they lost. Now, why am I telling you that? Because we still loved him, and we helped him the next year, and eventually he won. A lot of people didn't know that he lost to Gerald Ford in that first election. So I'm not here as sour grapes. I still love the people I voted for. Some of them didn't win. And if they didn't win, I hope they run again, and I'm going to help them again. But what I am concerned about, so in other words, I'll take a loss, but I'll come back fighting for a win, because eventually I want the win that I want, just like with the Reagans back in the late 70s. But in 1980, but we got to keep our elections secure and honest. They got to be fair. And the problem I have right now, I think I can't see another way other than voter ID, one-day voting, and at the end of the day, you know who won. I remember when that used to be the policy across this country, and it was a great way to go. Before we moved here, before my wife and I moved here, we had 4 daughters, and they married 4 wonderful boys from Utah. Lovely people, lovely families, and every year, that all happened about 15 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago. But every 2 years, I get a ballot. My daughters always harass me, saying, "Dad, you're probably voting for us, aren't you?" Oh, and by the way, my parents also deceased, both of them 10 years ago. And so I get 4 extra ballots for my 4 daughters and 2 from my parents. And my kids always accuse, and I always wonder, "Dad, are you gonna vote for us?" And every year at Christmas time, I give them the ballot to show them I didn't vote for you. I'm passionate about my vote, but I wouldn't do something dishonest and vote for you. But I see that coming here. I'm warning you, you need to stop that. And lastly, this whole thing about Lyman not getting to see and verify those signatures, that's just crazy. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, if you're gonna allow the signature process, you got to verify it. You have to have an independent accountant or someone to verify it. It's just ridiculous to think someone can just, especially if they're in charge of the election. You get Cox's office and Deidre, and they're in charge of the election, and they can say, "Oh yeah, we got our 28,000," but nobody knows. That's ridiculous. We're headed towards fraud, dishonest elections, and insecure elections if we don't fix those things. I think same-day voting, voter ID, by the end of the day, you count them out. Well, I saw it happen between the county convention and the state convention. The county convention, we put in our votes. We watched them count the votes right there. The ballots, sorry. We cast, they counted them, we watched them. We were all satisfied it was done fairly. We go to the state, and it was a cluster of a mess there with using electronic. This technology is supposed to make things easier. It doesn't, and it doesn't make it more honest, and doesn't make it more secure. And we got to keep our elections secure and honest. It's the only way to be fair in this country.
My name's Kimber Furr, Precinct Chair from Orem. I'd like to add my voice to not certifying this election until the Lyman Clausen campaign can see signatures. I think sitting here, I'm going out of my mind as you guys are talking about flags and signs and stamps and all of these things to try and secure the vote, when if we just voted in person day of, we would actually have a secure vote. I am a mother. I have 4 kids. In 2016, I drugged 2 little children while I was uncomfortably pregnant to the polls. I survived. I got my voice heard. This year, I was up at girls' camp. I came down the mountain from up above Heber to vote in person. It can be done as both a mother, as a part-time employee. We make our voices heard when we know that it's important, and I don't need excuses made for me. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Kristen Ritchie, and I'm from Highland. A few years ago, there was a phrase out there, trust but verify. My problem is I haven't had trust in our elections for several years, and there's no verification going on of some of the most important things. Now, what I've seen today is excellent, but if you don't have confidence in what is coming in, then it doesn't really matter in the end how much analysis you do of the data. I feel like in the case of Lyman and Clausen, I feel like it's just absolutely essential that they be granted the opportunity to see and verify that those signatures were actually lawfully gathered. Anything else would just be really an insult to the integrity of our elections. I feel very strongly that our elections are our most sacred right in this country, and I feel like to make them convenient for the masses is really not the ideal way to go. What we need to do is make sure that they are secure and transparent, and that we have clarity, that we can have confidence in the results. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kristen.
My name is Heather Fry. I live in Orem, Utah. I got the chance to attend the election offices, and I wanted to express my thanks to the staff. Luke was escorting me through and giving me an opportunity to learn about the process, and it was very informative, and I'll talk to them more later because there were several dozen labels that were incorrectly dated, et cetera. And I'm sure I gave Luke a little bit of a run for his money with as many questions as I was asking. But I appreciate that opportunity. There is a great quote by Warren Buffett. Look for three things in a person: intelligence, energy, and integrity. If they don't have the last one, don't even bother with the first two. And I appreciate the integrity that has been shown by several of the actions of our Utah County elections officials, and it provides me a sense of trust and confidence in the voting process that we have placed in our commissioners and in our Utah County clerk, and the efforts that they have made is truly appreciated. I also would like to stress that the words from the current debate, the gubernatorial debate, is that to have more mail-in ballots versus fewer people voting is a false choice. The ignorance of a populace is not reason enough to justify allowing it to dominate our public officials. The great escape of our times, as Thomas Sowell says, is the escape from personal responsibility for the consequences of one's own behavior. And as a mom, I also had to be responsible for not voting if I didn't get it done, if I didn't set up my time, if I didn't communicate with those who would support me. That's on me. It is not on my local officials. It is not on my government to make everything easier for me. My responsibility as a citizen of these United States and as of the state of Utah is to step up and stand up. Lastly, the great Thomas Sowell. It's hard to imagine a more stupid or dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong. And I have been paying the price of being wrong because I trusted in people who aren't paying the price. And who is paying the price for being wrong in this process? With all due respect, please do not believe in the false choices that we have been presented with. Please be people of integrity and do not certify this election until the legal process has been completed in the verification of the signatures of Spencer Cox and Deidre Henderson. Thank you.
Anyone else? Brett, we'll give you just a...
Sorry, I forgot. I just wanted to add my voice. I intended also to urge you to not certify this election. I forgot that in my hurry. So I'd like to go on record as adding my voice. Please do not certify this record until all of the problems and questions have been resolved to our satisfaction. Thank you.
Steve Watrous, once again. I just wanted to make a statement. I've heard comments about Phil Lyman. I began my career in Blanding, Utah, and I know the Lyman family. I knew his father. I dealt with him in business, and within the last day or two, I heard Phil Lyman say he really doesn't expect he's going to win the governorship. What he's trying to do is bring integrity and honesty to the election process in the state of Utah. That was all I wanted to mention.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll entertain one final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.